tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Hello to everyone in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is James Knowles coming at you for the RBLR Sports Podcast. I am here, as usual, covering the Rowdies of all of our shows. Don't forget that we, of course, cover the Lightning and the Bucks and the Rays as well. But I am not here with my usual co-host this week. Instead, I have our producer, Eureka, because Carlos, our usual co-host, is getting back from the World Cup. That old thing, you know. No big deal, right, Eureka? Who's just got a World Cup that he's coming back from? Big deal.
That didn't end like a week ago. America's out, so it's over, right? Like,
that's what I heard. I did hear that at least two places. No, unfortunately, with the U.S. out, it did not come to an end like you and I were hoping, Eureka. We unfortunately lost out in the round of 16 to the Netherlands, so we are out, as well as Ecuador and Mexico, who unfortunately for our other preview guests did not make it out of their respective groups. So that is the World Cup update. If you want more than that, please check out literally every other sports website that exists, because I'm sure they're covering the World Cup a lot. But we are here to cover the Rowdies, and we are going to continue, Eureka, with our season review. This is part 3. Part 1 was very long because we were covering the whole season for the team, you know, how we did as a team and everything. Last week, we covered the individual players who were on the defensive end, so our goalkeepers and defenders. And this week, Eureka, we're going to get into the midfielders and attackers and see how they did this past year.
yeah, it's one, it's always an honor to be here, and two, there's a lot to talk about with stunning performances all the way around for a team that got, in literally extra time in the Eastern Conference Finals for the third straight year. So no surprise here. We're going to gush about a lot of these guys, and some of them are returning, and some of them will not be in the green and gold anymore. But this is going to be a good episode for people who had very fond memories of our just high-octane attack that we had this year.
So, this is going to be our show. Just like last year, we're going to go through player grades. Effectively, though, what we're going to do is expectations at the beginning of the year versus reality now that we are out of it. So that's how we're going to do this, Eureka. And the way that we are going to go through it actually is going through the players who had the most appearances down to the players who had the least. And the last thing I want to say is please stay tuned towards the end, because we are going through Rowdy's roster news that has just recently dropped. So, Eureka, it's another packed episode. It's part 3, but we got to get through it all. We got to make sure that everyone knows how this season went. And if we ever want to revisit this in the future, let's say when the Rowdies do have a USL championship, then we can figure out exactly where we came from to get to where we are now.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good time capsule that if you want to go back and kind of relive the year that was for 2022, this is a good way to start. James, where do you want to begin?
Yeah, well, before we begin, I do want to say really quick, please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at RBLR Sports. And, of course, please like and subscribe to our podcast on all major podcast platforms. Now, Eureka, let's get into it here. We will get into the midfielders. Again, working our way down from most appearances to least appearances in that group. So, the first midfielder in that line is actually number 4 on the roster, Lewis Hilton. He is 29 years old. He made 36 appearances with 2 goals and 5 assists this past year, and he got 7 Man of the Match awards between Carlos and me over the course of this season. Now, as of today, since we know a little bit more about this, he is going to be signed up for us for the 2023 season at least, if not longer. So we do know that. And getting into this, let's go through his expectations and reality this year. What did you think Lewis Hilton was going to do before we got the season started? And now that it is over, did he do that, or did he maybe do more, maybe less? I feel like I know where this might be going.
Lewis Hilton is without a doubt one of the anchors of this Rowdies team, and one of the reasons that they have been on this run of form for the last 3 years now, or at least the 2 years that we've been really going in depth with our coverage here. Lewis Hilton is one of the guys who creates from that. I mean, he is, look, if you want to look at him defensively, he's got a high motor on him. He's always running. He's always trying to get there. And whether he's playing defensively as a midfielder and just jamming up the middle and kind of stopping all of the traffic that goes up there, well, if he steals the ball from you, then you're in a very bad position, because he can set up the offense in quick transition. He is one of the people that creates from the midfield position, and he's even he scored a couple here and there, but not you don't really count on him to put one in the net. You do count on him to get assists, and that is definitely where he makes his mark offensively. So, look, there's not a lot of things I can say bad. Like, there's not a lot of ways that he has disappointed me this year, especially. I think that in all walks of the team, he is a model to be there. He's a player that we're definitely going to hold in high regard years after he is gone from this team. But as of 2022, that's kind of what I expected as well. I expected him to be that centerpiece because it's what he did during our run to the final last year. And then he definitely didn't disappoint me this year. I mean, he's consistently on the pitch. He hasn't been a problem or liability when he's on there, and he is in fact one of the positive players that they have. So check marks all across the board. How about you, James? What did I miss?
No, I don't think you missed much at all. I would say, I generally agree, obviously, with everything you said there, and I do think also that that's a really good point that you made. Whenever it is that Lewis Hilton actually does leave the Rowdies, it's not going to be 2023, and depending on how that goes, we can probably go ahead and say we hope it's not 2024 or 2025, but. I think that whenever he does leave, it's going to be as one of the best players that this modern Rowdies team has had in their organization. He was signed to play a role, and he has played that role better than I would say most players in the league who fill in a similar way. He's up there with the Paulo Del Piccolos at Louisville City. And, I actually don't know if there's anybody else who's up there with him. I think that Lewis Hilton is effectively for the Rowdies. He's in a class of his own, just because how many, central midfielders do we remember a couple years after the fact? I think that he will definitely live up to that. And this past season is just another reason why he was extremely consistent, of course, something that you already mentioned. And beyond that, he was such a notable presence. Like, if Lewis Hilton ever was out, it was readily apparent. But luckily, of course, because of how consistent he was, there were very few instances that he actually did go off the field and spend any good time that we, didn't have him out there. So I think that Lewis Hilton definitely, if there was any expectation that he did not meet, it was only because he exceeded it. But everything that we wanted Lewis Hilton to do, he did, and probably more. I think that he is one of the most important players on this team, and having him back next year is going to be very important for us, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, especially at this level, when you just know you can stick a guy in and he's going to give you a good to great performance for a full 90 minutes. Like, he's very rarely. If like I'm looking at the stats here, it's like he puts up 90s across the board. So I mean, there's a couple games where he subbed in 30 minutes. I mean, he's just he plays all the time, and I wouldn't change that at all. So if I could give him more minutes, I would.
Yeah, I think that's another good way to put it, in fact. All right, well, that should be a pretty open and shut case, honestly. Lewis Hilton had expectations coming into this season that he absolutely met or exceeded all along the way, and I think that is pretty much all we need to say. I'm just waiting for him to be at the Rowdies long enough that he has made 100 appearances, and then we can revisit this. But let's move on to the next guy on this list in terms of appearances. That is number 7 on the roster, Jan Ekra. He is 32 years old, made 33 appearances with us last year with 1 assist and 1 Man of the Match award from Carlos or myself. He was re-signed by the Rowdies as of yesterday, and that is just pending league approval. So I'm assuming, obviously, that there will be no issues, and we will have him for this upcoming year. Now, Eureka, I think based on last year, Jan Ekra had pretty high expectations, actually. He ended the season in 2021 as one of our starters up top alongside Steven Dos Santos and Sebastian Guenzati. He was the least attacking out of that group, and I think that he was mostly in there for his ability as a pressure source when we didn't have the ball. That is where he mostly excelled. In the attack, obviously, he is still a very good player and very important. He is good at getting himself out of positions where, he's under pressure with the ball at his feet, so he can actually do a little bit of both there. But additionally, like I said, it was the pressure that really stood out, and that was something that was a huge feature of our team last year, a way that we scored a lot of goals. And I don't think that we are a less pressuring team in 2022. But this past year, I don't think that Jan Ekra was quite as involved in that as he was before. He was mostly played as a midfielder this year. So at least in that sense, we have to temper our expectations and look at it in a different way, Eureka. So what do you think of his mostly midfield performances? And do you think that it was quite up to the same level as it was previously?
To be honest, I don't think. I think that we have just purely looking at did he meet the expectations? I don't think he did. Now, that's not to say he didn't do good things, but to be fair to him, he didn't really play consistent minutes. I mean, he comes in, he plays, like, there's only a few games that he started if played more than 60 minutes. And so you throw a guy in for the final 13 minutes, the final 20 minutes, like, you can't really get a rhythm with that. And so very few times this season did he have a string of, over 70 minutes together. When he put them together, he was fine. He had stand-up performances, I think, against the Phoenix Rising game was a huge game that was early on in the season that we all were. It turned out that Phoenix wasn't as good as we expected them to be, but at the time, that was a very, very big moment of the season where we were trying to position ourselves back at the top of the USL. And so coming off of that, though, it's not like he did bad, but it just, we had higher I think we had higher expectations than what he was unfortunately being able to put out there. And I don't know if that's an age thing. I don't know if that's that we brought in a different player to kind of play that position. Is it because we changed his position? I think it's a little bit of everything across the board. But in all honesty, I think we had higher hopes and higher praises to sing about Jan Ekra. Famously, that's like what this podcast is we're just renaming ourselves the Jan Ekra podcast. But this year it just seemed like a down year for him for a number of reasons that some of them were probably not his control.
Yeah, going into this, as you said, we obviously love Jan Ekra. I think that I would love to give him, the best grade overall if we were doing it that way. But when we look at what we had from him in the 2021 season and what we got from him in 2022, again, it's not to say that it is a bad thing that he ultimately turned out in 2022. His performances were just not quite at the same level as we were used to. And I guess that it might be down to age, certainly. It's just a lot of wear and tear when you're 32 years old and you've been playing soccer for as long as he has. Lest anyone forget, he grew up in the same academy as Karim Benzema. So they've been playing together for as long as those guys have been out there. But Jan Ekra is, obviously down at this level, and we love having him here because he's a very good player who can do a lot of good things. But for what we wanted, I'm not sure that he is. I'm not sure that he did all of those things, unfortunately. And I think that the pressure aspect of our team this year, did we score as many goals? I feel like it wasn't as many goals off of that pressing in terms of, us winning the ball back and then, immediately taking up and getting a chance. I wish that we had those numbers offhand. I probably could have done that over the course of the season. Maybe we'll look to do that this year. But Certainly, Jan Ekra wasn't in the position to do the pressing anyway. So that is a totally different way to look at it, between one season and another. And I think that it'll be good for us to have him next year. For one thing, he is a veteran presence. Obviously, that is very good for anyone who does come into the team over the offseason. And we don't know who that's going to be at this point. But they need to know, coming in, the kind of players that they're dealing with. Someone like Jan Ekra, who has been in the USL Championship as long as he has, comes from the pedigree that he does. These are the players that you're with. You need to step up to that level. But at the same time, is Jan Ekra at the level that he was at before? I hope that maybe, he's got another gear in him, and maybe this was a season that was an up and a down season, so to speak, for 21 to 22. And then 23 will be the way back up. But, that is something to consider, I guess. So, that is where we have it with Jan Ekra. And I think that I'm going to be, high on him next year, but we're just going to have to look and see not only how the Rowdies line up, because that did change between one season and the next, but also, consider his playing time from one year to the next as well for the 2023 season. So that will take us to the next player in this list. That is number 23 on the roster, Sebastian Dalgaard. He is 31 years old, made 32 appearances with 5 goals and 3 assists. He had 2 Man of the Match awards given to him between Carlos and myself this past year. And as of today, we know that Sebastian Dalgaard will be around for 2023. Now, Eureka, I think that for me, at least, Sebastian Dalgaard is a player that exceeded expectations. I think that we had pretty good expectations for him based on the 2021 season. And I think 2022 came around and he became an even more important player. And not only that, but what really stood out for him was his versatility on the field. Not only was he very good from the right, but also from the left. And that could be in a 4-3-3 position or in a 4-5-2-1 position. He or not 4-5-2-1, but yes, obviously a 3-5-2 position. He could fill in and make, kind of any system work for us. And that was really important because we did use different systems a lot more than we did in the previous year.
Yeah, again, Neil likes to use these versatile. It's the Connor Antleys, the Lewis Hiltons, and the Dalgaards that really fuel this system that he likes to run. And with Sebastian Dalgaard, whether you're putting him way out on the wing, he's good offensively. I think we're gonna rely on that moving forward with whoever our next 11 is. I think you definitely fit him in, whether that's on the wing in the midfield, or if you're playing a 4 in the back, you can trust him to be one of the only few, 3 or 4 midfielders that you're going to have there, because he's good at passing, he's good in transition, especially with putting balls in the right places for a more of an attacking forwards. He can put that there, but also he's pretty dangerous himself. He can shoot from long range. I think there was quite a few times where he was very scary, if not putting one in the back of the net. So he's one of the highest rated, just as consistently good players that we have this entire year. Again, this is one of the there was a little stretch at the beginning of the season that was kind of getting our feet wet, but to be fair, he's good way more than he is a liability. And I think we saw, maybe he's one of the guys that maybe could have done a little better in the playoffs. So if I'm grading it completely fairly, but I think he got injured in one of the games.
Yes, he was also facing injury problems, unfortunately.
So and it's part of it. But Dalgaard on the whole is definitely, like I said, part of the fuel that keeps us going, because, he's played 4 or 5 different positions for the Rowdies this year. And I think going into this year, we had those expectations. Well, maybe they were a little bit lower. James, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. I think Dalgaard's absolutely exceeded expectations, but I think we just kind of expected him to ramp up what he had done in 2021. But then again, you never know. Like we still don't know what 2023 looks like,
right?
And how these players and what positions they're going to play. So I don't think it's fair to say that we had low expectations for Dalgaard or lower than what they ended up getting. But I think he was better than anticipated for sure. That's a long way of saying that, but he was very good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that he's going to be another player that comes along with, any new signings over this offseason. He's going to be able to say, this is the level that you guys need to reach. He was a part of a lot of good things, and it's unfortunate, like you said, that he was facing the injury problems that he was. I think that will, that's just something that could happen as you get older, but also can happen to, any normal player just because of the amount of games that I think guys are asked to play in a season at this point. That's the nature of the game with professional soccer. But I do think that he's going to be able to add a lot of things as a starter, or potentially, depending on who comes in, as a very strong depth piece. And that's another thing to keep in mind going forward. I think that Sebastian Dalgaard is going to be an important player. And I think that if he can build up maybe a little bit more on the scoring side, then, we'll have an even more dangerous team than we could have ever expected before. I'm excited for him to do that. I know he had one absolute banger that he scored from quite a ways out, and he put it in. After the game, everybody was asking him, like, hey, so where did that come from? And he said that he'd been working on it in training, and he was just waiting to kind of pull it out. So I'm hopeful that maybe we see one or two more of those this upcoming year.
Yeah, I mean, but not only that would be if we're not doing that show yet, but my expectations for him next year are, I think he's definitely going to be needed on the offensive side. I mean, he plays pretty much everything really well, and especially setting up, creating for those other attackers. He's done that when asked to do that in this current role, and who knows, maybe he turns into a little bit more of a dynamic scorer over the offseason. So I think he's a guy that's getting a little bit up there in age, but I think we still have at least a few more USL Championship level years out of him for sure.
Absolutely. I think that is definitely true. So let's move on then to the next guy, number 21 on the roster. That's Dayon Harris. He is 25 years old, made 29 appearances with 5 goals and 3 assists. And along with all of that, he won 4 Man of the Match awards for us at RBLR Sports. Now, Dayon Harris, as of today, was announced as a re-signed player for the 2023 season. So I think that is positive news. Dayon Harris, I think, came in with pretty high expectations, Eureka. This was all based on the play of 2021 and how we saw him in bursts, but didn't really get him at a level that we were expecting consistency, let's say. Now, Dayon Harris did not start a lot of games in 2022, but his play as a substitute when he came in, I think, was definitely more consistent. So in that sense, I would say he exceeded expectations. But what the 2022 season from Dayon Harris really makes me think is I'm waiting for him to put it all together just even more. I'm hopeful that 2023 is, a third year up this mountain and not a plateau. That's what I'm expecting based on the year that we saw in 2022.
Dayon is just a bolt of lightning that Neil has utilized this season, I think it isn't a coincidence that this Rowdies team, when they switched their mentality from a defensive to offensive mind with the system this year, Dayon is a huge reason that at any time he could, in the second half, he can bring in a guy who is elite level speed, especially at this level of competition, a person that can, if they need to extend go side to side, kind of spreading out all 5 of those midfielders. Dayon's going to be one of those guys that's getting ready for a Hilton lob or moving it to the corner of the pitch. Again, I do have to say, the one thing that I think precludes him from being a starter is that he is kind of a diminutive player, and he also just needs to get a little better with one-on-one dueling, or at least because what he can do right now is he uses that elite speed and gets around the back line of a defense. And if he, if you're playing the top level of defenders and they neutralize that, or at least guys that have enough quickness to go one-on-one with Dayon, which again is a handful of players at this level, then he kind of hits a brick wall, and then it turns into, well, can he cross the ball? And defenders can usually get their bodies positioned in the way of Dayon's crosses, or if he can't dribble past them to create even more into the box, then he's kind of just stuck there. So that, I think, is the difference between him being a full-time starter in the 11 and being this kind of just very attack-minded, quick sub that comes in for 45 to 35 minutes. But that's what Neil used him as this year, and in many games. I mean, look, especially against it's so good they're going to be here again. But Loudoun United probably has nightmares of Dayon Harris. Even hearing his name, I think they've muted his name mentions on Twitter because when he plays that level of competition, he just eats them up alive, and you can see that he is a level above just kind of the average in the USL. It's just he does need to pick up a couple more tools in the tool bag to get to that full-time starter, award-winning level that to be honest with you, I think he's got in him. He is a player that you can just see all the other Rowdies when he's cooking. It's electric, and everyone feeds off of that. So I could use way more of that for next year.
Yeah, I think that we were definitely hoping for more consistency based on the 2021 season, and we got that in 2022. But I agree. Put it all together a little more, and maybe it's not consistency at this point that we're looking for. Maybe it's a bit more of a spark, Maybe it's more of the end product that I think we're looking for, because he was definitely very good at getting past a man. Maybe this is where the biggest problem lies at this point, I would say, is he just needs to, when he does obviously get a ball that he can get a cross in, find a Rowdy with with the cross, find his feet, find his head, find his knee. I don't care. Just give us a chance to get a good shot off at this point. Maybe that's the one thing that I think that we were hoping for and didn't get this past year. So I would say he definitely met his expectations, but not quite all together yet. It's very close. It's certainly very close. And I think that he even showed spurts of it, within those 5 goals. There were a couple where you and Carlos and I were all like, whoa, where did that come from? Can we get a little bit more of that? I remember for sure there were a couple of times that he was he beat several players to score one, or within those assists. I know that those were important too, but there were definitely moments where you just wanted to see a couple more of those.
It's a shame that Carlos isn't here today, because I think Carlos is one of Dayon Harris's number one fans, and we'll have a lot to say about Dayon in the coming weeks, and as we preview the next year's team. So stay tuned, Dayon Harris fans. You definitely have fans here. So meet expectations. I don't know if he met his expectations, but he definitely. I think it's because we just had high expectations. That's more indicative of us, because I think Neil used him in such a way, and I think that Dayon got the job done overall is what. So for Neil's expectations, I think he met or exceeded them. I think us as fans kind of. I think we still are waiting for him to take a leap that we know he can do, but we're still waiting for it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put that, and probably a good way to leave it. So let's move on to our next midfielder here. Number 6 on the roster, Junior Etu, 28 years old, 21 appearances with 1 assist, and we do know as of now that he was released from the Rowdies for the 2023 season. So just like the Rowdies on social media, we do want to say thank you to Junior Eto for everything that he did for this club. It is not going to be something that we forget. I think as Rowdies fans, he was able to fill in a couple of times. Now, let's get into what we thought of him going into the year. Eureka, I remember thinking that Junior Eto was going to be a good depth piece. I figured that he would be there when we have a couple of injuries, certainly, and that came to be true. He stepped in when we had a couple of players go off, also due to, they needed to step out late in the game just because they were tired, cramping up, or they were possibly facing a yellow or red card. I remember that getting late into the games in October and into the playoffs, but we didn't have, sky high expectations. Certainly, we didn't expect him to be a regular starter. We didn't expect him to contribute a ton in terms of the statistics side of things, but he definitely played his role. And, as a soccer team, obviously it is a team. That is the whole thing behind it. It's not just one player. It's not even just 11 players. You're going to have somebody fill in a lot. And I think that Junior Eto is more than a capable fill-in. So at least in that sense, I would say he met his expectations there. When it came to it, I thought that he was one of the better signings that we made in the offseason. Not the best signing from his club. I will get to that, I think, next on our list here. But from Charlotte Independence, he came to us as a regular starter there, I believe, or a semi-regular starter, certainly. And here he was definitely more of a bit part player. He started once or twice at least. But, he came in a lot towards the end of the year as a substitute to fill in a lot for the attacking midfielder side, not necessarily the Lewis Hilton role, so to speak. And I appreciated that from him. And I think that it'll be not unfortunate to see him go necessarily, but it'll be interesting to see who fills that role if he's not going to do that, because he was definitely good at filling in. But are you going to have somebody to fill in? That's just, happy to sit in that role. I'm sure most players want to start, and maybe that's where Junior Eto was.
Yeah, again, as a depth piece, sure. I think no one expected him to be a full-time starter. He came with some good. He had already played at this level. He played at Charlotte for about the same amount of games that he played for us. But to be honest with you, I'm kind of down on Eto this year. He came in, but again, it's hard when you're just filling in or playing a few minutes here, a few minutes there to really get a good grasp. But even when he played, there was a little stretch where he got more than 2/3 of a game, and he did okay. Because I'm trying to think of any just standout performances. And that's my problem, is that with Eto, you kind of, me personally, my personal observation is that you just kind of didn't notice he was there, which, I guess that's good in terms of he's not soaking up a bunch of yellows and causing problems. But at the same time, he's just kind of there in the midfield. The one game I can really say that he played well in is probably in the Open Cup, I guess, is when you'd get more minutes. He played more than 2/3 of that game against Orlando, I believe, and I think he did a good job at that. That was about it. If I'm going back through the stats, it's not like there was any killer games that he had, and honestly, I wish him the best moving forward. But the Junior Eto era of the Rowdies is kind of came and gone, and I don't really know what I'm going to remember most about Junior to be.
Yeah, no, I guess that's fair too. He was a player who, if he's one of those guys that you prefer not to see too much, because if you do, you kind of expect that it's going to be a negative memory. So I guess that's probably a good way to a good way to look at things. He's going to be he'll be a good fill-in wherever he goes. Maybe it'll even be as a starter, but maybe the Rowdies starters are just a level above, which I think is kind of what we were looking at before the season started too.
Yeah. Not a. I mean, look, I guess I shouldn't put it that way. It wasn't like a disappointment. It's just more like right in the middle. I mean, I guess we had average expectations to low expectations, and we got that. So you met your very low expectations, James.
Yeah, and suppose that's good enough too at times.
I get C's get degrees, right, James?
There you go. So let's move on then to the other player signed from Charlotte Independence. That's number 8 on our roster, Jake Arman. He is 26, turning 27 years old, made 18 appearances with 1 goal and 2 man-of-the-match performances. He is, as of now, re-signed for the 2023 season. So we do know that coming in here. And for 2021, I would say I had pretty high expectations for Jake Arman. He was a pain in our backsides in 2021 for Charlotte. And I think that I was hoping he would do the same for us. At a certain point of the year, he filled in for Leo Fernandez as a left wing back from 2021 so that Leo could actually move up the field. And that was very good. Now, unfortunately, he did face a fair few games out with injury problems. And because of that, Leo Fernandez did not step back. They just, rotated other players into that role because Leo was playing so good. But I still think that Jake Arman had a good season. When it comes to expectations versus the way that it panned out for him, the only thing that I can say is he didn't meet expectations because he was out for as many games as he was. It was very hard to build up a rhythm towards the end of the season for a player like him because of the amount of games that he missed. But otherwise, I still think we saw all the flashes of capability for him. I still think we saw all the flashes of him turning into a very good Rowdies player. And I'm hopeful that we have that in the future, but maybe not quite what we wanted for this, this 2022 season.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that he was brought in and we were pretty hype. I know that John, USL Tactics, John Morrissey, was definitely a fan. It was like, oh no, you are about to pair Hilton and Arman in the same midfield. But then Jake kind of ended up having to play on the left side. But I think we still haven't seen all of what we're going to see out of Jake Arman. So I think we still have high expectations. He's on the younger side, but he's over 100 appearances in the USL Championship. So, I mean, it's a guy that's been around this level for a while, and I'm still stoked. Like, I think he definitely when he played, he exceeded the expectations. That when he was on the pitch, he was a key contributor, one of the most consistent guys when he was playing. And unfortunately, he just had a couple knocks that took him out of contention. But even coming cold, right? Even coming in cold in the final or the Eastern final, he played his butt off, man, and did phenomenal. And I think that Jake's a guy that we're going to have a little bit more time to think about over the offseason. But again, I don't think we've unlocked all of Jake Arman. So, does that meet my expectations, or I think so. I think he did just what we expected him to do whenever he was able to play.
Yeah, that's fair as well. And I just want to see more of him at this point. I think that I probably speak for a lot of people with that. Jake Arman can put together a good season. We know that. And he can put together a great performance. Certainly, we know that from his time at the Rowdies. I just want to see it for the Rowdies over the course of the season. But we're obviously going to have to see how it pans out. Hopefully, the injury gods are a bit nicer to us. I think that they were actually quite cruel for this entire team for the 2022 season.
Yeah, it's a storyline for
sure. Now let's move on to number 22 in the roster. That is Kyle Gregg. He is 32 and turning 33 this offseason. He made 18 appearances for the Rowdies with 2 goals and 2 assists And it should be noted, for our purposes, his option for the 2023 season was declined, so he will not be around for us. Now, when it comes to expectations, I didn't have the highest expectations for him. I thought that he was going to be a substitute fill-in for Steven Dos Santos. Now, as it turned out, Steven Dos Santos also didn't quite do in 2022 what he did in 2021, and we didn't play the same way. So having that kind of role to fill almost wasn't the same. And unfortunately, it worked out that Kyle Gregg was not I don't want to say not needed, because he was needed. And the 2 goals that he did score, I remember them actually coming at pretty important times. One of them was a goal that was like in a game where we were already up a couple, but one of them did count for a lot. I believe it was one that got us 3 points. But the problem was we weren't really playing that kind of style where Kyle Gregg and Steven Dos Santos were the guys anymore. And Steven Dos Santos, compared to Kyle Gregg, is going to be the better player. So if you're going to go with one of them, it's going to be him, obviously. Now, Kyle Gregg's 18 appearances, I think they're really tapered off towards the end of the year. And I think that is kind of indicative of how it went for him, which is unfortunate as a player. But as a team, you have to take all of that into consideration. So I just, in terms of what I wanted out of him and what happened, it was roughly the same, I guess.
Yeah, to be fair, I think no one had very high expectations. Like, again, you had said it when we were talking about Etu, is like, if Kyle Gregg was getting meaningful minutes, it means that something bad had happened at the top of the 11. So, in terms of coming in and filling that role for the 20 to 30 minutes that he was expected to play, I think he did a phenomenal job at that. He could come in, but it's really the little extended time he had to play from the beginning. Now, even when he was starting, I don't think you thought he was going to play the whole 90 minutes. It was kind of like, you're going to get a good 45 out of Gregg, and then you're going to bring in some different strikers or maybe some of these Swiss Army knives that we can change up our formation a little bit and play guys and get him out of the midfield. So, well, he's a striker, but it's kind of like, if you're going to take Gregg off, you're maybe putting in maybe Lucky, or you're putting in Dayon, but Dayon's more of on the outside, right? So with Gregg, it's switching up tactics and formations, because he is more of that kind of. He's not as good of a target man as Dos Santos, but that's where they put him. So, yeah, I mean, kind of lowered expectations anyway with Kyle Gregg, but I can see why they didn't bring him back, because it's just kind of an unneeded piece. I mean, then who knows what Neil's going to unleash on us for 2023, but yeah, Kyle Gregg. Again, it's just kind of mid to lower expectations, and he definitely was not a negative. Yeah. So I'm all right with that.
I think that's fair too.
I just don't have it like with these guys. Unfortunately, it's when we've had a few of these in a row, but like Etu and Gregg and even Jan, because Jan kind of went down into this level, but they were just. These guys in the midfield were just kind of like, none of them were super big scorers. None of them were just so much better than their expectations. And you could tell the difference between them and the Armins and the Dalgaards and the Hiltons that we have and that's playing those same positions, that are like, it's obvious those guys are just a complete level above.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. I think that's a good way to put it for him. Yeah. And, and that's unfortunate, I suppose. But like we said, it's a team, and you got to look at it that way, and you got to, try and build for the success of the team overall. So that's where we are. Yeah. The next player on our list is number 31 on the roster, Nicky Law. He is 34 and turning 35 in the offseason. He made 15 appearances, scored 2 goals, and got 2 assists. He also earned 1 Man of the Match award from RBLR Sports, and he is under contract for the 2023 season. So, expectations. He came in halfway through the season. He was a trade for Juan Tejada, whom we're going to have to cover next, as it turns out. But Nicky Law came in, and I think that a lot of people, when he was signed, were mad that he was signed at the expense of Juan Tejada. Now, I get that. I do get that. Juan Tejada was a fan favorite, and I understand why. We'll get into him, like I said, in a bit here. But, Eureka, we needed more depth in the midfield. And I think that in terms of a level head, in terms of a steady head, and someone who's smart, knows how to win games in, crucial moments, there are few players in this league who have the pedigree of Nicky Law. I think that I had pretty high expectations for him coming in when he actually joined. And I think that mostly he met everything because he did see out the season as a player that we could rely on in tough situations. It's unfortunate, obviously, that we didn't get past Louisville City, but he did play a role in that game. And he played a role leading up to it as well. I think that he was also, the goals that he did score, I know one of them was a belter from a good distance out, and it was just lovely to see. But it's not just that's not mostly what he's known for. What he's known for is being the guy in the midfield who can facilitate the attack, make the smart passes, make the smart defensive plays, and he did all of that, and he did it while still running quite a good bit as a 34-year-old.
Well, I think you're bringing him in at the end of July because of injuries and because of kind of a little bit of some of the guys they had there. Just you were hoping more out of Armin, but he was hurt. You bring in Nicky Law, and I agree with what you said. Towards the end of the year, he became just a completely super valuable player. But it took him, I think, a little bit, which might be. I mean, there's a reason that in Indy 11 he was kind of inconsistent. You would have these banger games against the lower competitions, but for the most part, he was just kind of like just not having a great time of it. And I think that's why they needed to change. Indy 11 needed to change their scoring. They needed to make wholesale change there. And so the Rowdies swooped in, got a guy with that pedigree. It took him, I think, up until about October. So we're talking July. It took him probably 2 months to get acclimated to the Rowdies. And then towards the end of the go time, when it was time for the playoffs, is really what they were hoping that he would be ready to go. And he did not disappoint at all. So it's kind of like there's these two phases to me. There's his like getting to know you phase for about 60 days. And he played kind of up and down minutes during those times. And I really think that we had good expectations for him. And then once he had those 60 days to kind of get acclimated to the system and the players and everything, then he was really able to unlock that facilitation. And that's why we saw the Rowdies kind of playing their best soccer at the right time going into the playoffs.
Yes, absolutely. He was a regular starter as we moved into the playoffs, and I think that it was because of the play that he had in the games leading up to them, So, it's a good thing to note, certainly. You have to get into the way that the Rowdies play. It's not, it's not the same system as everybody, but it's not terribly different. So he did find his way in, and once he was there, he ultimately kept his spot. I think that hopefully, if we're doing a quick expectations for next year, I'm hopeful that he doesn't end up a starter necessarily. I hope that we have someone who can do that. But if he is able to fill the same kind of role where he started with the Rowdies, he comes in late and he sees out a game and he does all the smart plays and he kind of makes sure that we can shut a team down, then, I'll be happy with that, because that is what I wanted him to do. And I saw the capability of it for sure. You just got to have the whole time of the off season to put together. And I think that he'll really gel into this team.
Well, look, how dangerous do you see? The name that I would really think about is Jake Armin, because you have Nicky Law, who I think next year, since you brought it up, will be able to come in for fits and spells. Maybe not a full 90, but unless needed. But I think that just having that valuable resource of a guy who's played at his level and pedigree to feed into a Jake Arman that's like in his mid-20s. He still has room to grow. He still has things. And they play not the same game, but they're pretty similar. Or at least Arman, I think, can learn a few tricks from Nicky Law. But just through training, it's through that everyday battle that he's going to go against him that you're going to see a rise in Arman, because I believe Arman would be your starting guy in this situation, with Nicky Law kind of coming in for whoever he needs to in the midfield, and maybe even pair. If you could pair, you have Nicky Law and Arman and Hilton at the same time in that midfield, depending on who we bring in to replace Dos Santos and kind of help the strikers up top. Man, it's it's already looking kind of scary if you could do that for a few minutes a game.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the next player then, someone that I said we were going to hit next, and it's going to be a little bit of a sore subject for sure, that was number 9 on our roster, Juan Tejada, 25 turning 26, made 13 appearances this past year with 1 goal and 1 assist, as well as 1 man of the match. As I'm sure everyone listening already knows, and if you didn't until you just heard in our segment about Nicky Law, he was traded away in the middle of the season. He was sent to Indy 11, and I think that rankled a lot of fans because he was definitely a fan favorite. He was, kind of a local boy. He's originally from Panama, but he went to the IMG Academy in Bradenton, obviously very close by. That I think it was best for all partners if Juan Tejada ultimately went out and found a team where he was going to get a little bit more playing time. And I think that that's hopefully what he's found in Indy 11. But, our expectations probably, I think that I saw him as a depth piece. And ultimately, he wasn't, a sufficient depth piece for the Rowdies. So that's kind of difficult to say. It's unfortunate, but, we got to look at things as they are. And that is the truth of it here.
I couldn't have put that better. That's way more eloquently than I could think, because, look, we love the Fox in the Box, man. He just plays with that enthusiasm and just wasn't able to rise above. Look, this is the problem, not problem, but it's an embarrassment of riches when you have such amazing talent that we had. And so, we brought him in as a youngster, you let him learn, and then he just never was able to rise above the competition that he was facing. But he still has so much more room to grow. And I think, I watched some Indy 11 games as soon as we had put him in there, because they would start their games about 30 minutes ahead of time from the Rowdies games. So on ESPN Plus, you'd pop over to Indy 11 and you'd see Juan Tejada and that hair flowing around the whole field. And it was, it's kind of like, I'm happy for him. Unfortunately, it won't be with the Rowdies, but I'm happy that he finally gets to get a full chance to shine and hopefully grow from this potential that he has inside of him that we all thought. So, oh man, it's like I don't know what the analog is it's like you're dating a girl or something and you're like, you're really cool. It's just we're not gonna make it, but I'm breaking up, but it's not a bad thing. It's breaking up because we just need to be different. We're just different people. And that's how I feel about Juan, is like, I want him to succeed unless he's playing the Rowdies. But for all those other games he plays, I want him to score a million goals and go on and prove us all wrong. So, or whatever if that's what he needs. He was such a good guy. James and I had the honor and privilege of talking to him in post-game pressers and in a few other situations where he was always generous with his time. He was always more than happy to talk and just talk. We were, questions we would ask him, but also just having regular conversations. And sometimes that's a challenge to get out of a player. But Juan was more than gracious with his time and his energy, and it's no wonder why everyone loves the kid. So
absolutely. And I do wish him all the best, but as you said, just not here when he's playing us. So let's go to the last midfielder, and we will move then into the attacking list that you separated here, Eureka. I think that it was a good idea to do that because they do kind of play in different roles for the most part. But the last one is number 46 on our roster, Santi Cazorla. He is 18 years old. He only made one appearance. And at this point, his status is unknown as a potential homegrown player. Now, I do believe that he is signed up to go to a college. I believe that that is University of Michigan, if my sources at topdrawersoccer.com are correct. But yeah, that is that is the player that we're looking at last here. In terms of expectations, Eureka, I guess we didn't really have any expectations for him because he's a homegrown player.
Come on.
I think that him getting any playing time at this point is effectively exceeding them, and I think that what he did was one appearance in the Open Cup game. Am I correct in that?
Did Santi Cazorla get a USL? It was. I think he played Villages. Where? I'm gonna pull this up real quick. Thank you to Santi Castaneda. Yeah, I cannot. I can't pull it up real quick. I might edit this out, but probably not. Let's see. Well, because what he did play is he played like in the high school Premier League that's out here, the Florida Premier League,
right.
That's out here, and he was the MVP of that whole tournament, and then from playing that within a day or something, or within 24 hours, was on the pitch playing for the Rowdies. I believe it was against the Villages in that Open Cup. Because I think did he start that game? Because I think he started, and then they brought Tate in the same game.
Yeah, I believe so.
But then again, that was a lot of beers ago, so I can't remember.
But yeah, as we said, just not many expectations for a player coming in as a homegrown. So at this point, it just kind of, we're going to have to see where he ends up. And I'm excited for him in the future. I think that, when he ultimately does likely go to University of Michigan, he's probably going to succeed there. He's obviously a very good player. And I'm thinking that that's they're a pretty good school. They do have some pedigree for players turning professional. So I'm hopeful that that is, something that happens in his future. Based on what we've seen this year, we can't make any projections because there wasn't too much to go off of. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaving it for Santi Castaneda. You got anything else on him?
Oh, dude, way exceeded expectations because we didn't know who he was, just hopefully this just leads to more and more academy. Look, we're so happy when we get our academy kids and they get to play and they get signed. So, let's do more of that. I like that.
Good point. So that will do it for this batch of players, and we've got another batch to go. We will probably turn that into a part 4 next week. We're not going to wait that long. It's not going to be that long before we do it. But before we get into our next segment here, I do want to say liking and subscribing is free, of course. But if you think you might need some new threads this year coming up, you can support our podcast just a little bit more by heading over to shop.rblrsports.com and checking out all the designs we've got cooked up. There will be a link in the description. And if you want to get something for Christmas for somebody, please use a promo code that we have for you for 10% off. That is COYR. And you can get some gifts online for anyone in your life who likes Tampa Bay sports. So now, Eureka, I think that we're going to talk about, who are the players that we absolutely need to stay or we could possibly allow to go. At this point, we probably don't need to do that because we do actually know who's staying and going. Yeah. So let's just talk about the most important players out of this list. I think that we'll do this really quickly and then we'll move into our last segment. But for me, there are probably 2 players that I will say this is just based on playing time and, their contributions. The most important players for me are Lewis Hilton and Sebastian Dalgaard, straight up out of that group. And then, in the second tier, I would say probably Jan Ekra, Dayon Harris, Jake Arman. And as it turns out, those are all players who are sticking around next season anyway. But yeah, is there anything that you think that I'm missing by leaving that out and only listing them?
No, Hilton, Dalgaard. I mean, I have very high expectations for Armin, and I think that, like, again, when he played really well, and I think that he's going to be going into 2023. I expect him to be more of a, unless we're going to go ahead and sign someone that's even better than he is. Like if we sign another guy that's at the Hilton, Dalgaard, I mean they play different places, but like unless we're bringing in a just top level midfielder, I think that internally they expect Armin to play a lot better. And and be more important is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly. And I'm hopeful for Jake Armin in that sense too. As we've already stated with him, I was expecting the same thing when we signed him from Charlotte Independence. He can get there again. I'm certain of that. And it's just whether or not he will, of course. But yeah, there's every reason to think that he should be able to, barring injuries. So, we'll pray again to those injury gods that we have some better luck this year. Other than that, Lewis Hilton and Sebastian Dalgaard were the ones that were, for me, obviously, I don't think anyone here is going to question Lewis Hilton in terms of his importance to this team. For Sebastian Dalgaard, I think that he just expanded upon what he did in the previous year. And one thing that I want to hit on with him is that he had never spent more than 2 consecutive years at any team before moving to the Tampa Bay Rowdies, if I'm not mistaken. That was based on, his prior career in the USL and over in Denmark as well, I believe. So for him to stick around this amount of time, I think that it not only shows, what kind of player he is, but what kind of team he thinks the Tampa Bay Rowdies are and where he thinks this roster can go. If you want to win trophies, we are going to be your best option to do that. Yeah. So I'm excited for him to stick around. And now, Eureka, let's just get into our extra time segment here, because they kind of jumped our gun, the Tampa Bay Rowdies, when it came to asking who do we want to stay, whom could we possibly allow to leave, all that kind of stuff. They blew us out of the water here, because we do have roster decisions from the Rowdies. Let's go through them real quickly here. This does include players from last week. Under contract for the 2023 season already were Rico Rosarena, Connor Antley, Aaron Guillen, Lewis Hilton, Nicky Law, Jake Armin, Leo Fernandez, Sebastian Guinzotti, and Jordan Adebayo-Smith. Yes, also, if you forgot Jordan Adebayo-Smith, who was out on loan at the New York Red Bulls too. Then Jan Ekra had his option exercised pending league and federation approval. We're obviously assuming that that'll be fine, so expect to see Jan Ekra in the green and gold again next year. Contract extensions were just announced today, Eureka, and those included Sebastian Dalgaard and Dayon Harris, so we will keep them as well. Now we're going to move into the sticky situation out of all of this. Some loanees departed after their individual loans expired, and those include, unfortunately, all 4 of them: Phil Breno, CJ Cochran, Robert Castellanos, and Jake LaCava. Now, when it comes to Phil Breno, we don't necessarily know. He was on loan from Forward Madison. Does he want to stay there? I can't tell you from my position. CJ Cochran, we don't know, because Oklahoma City is probably not going to be involved in the 2023 season, which is unfortunate in terms of, there being soccer in Oklahoma City. But I don't know what that means for CJ Cochran as well. We could stand to benefit in terms of this player, but I don't know if that's going to continue or not. Robert Castellanos was on loan from Nashville SC, who released him. That was something we announced last week. And, that's another player that we just don't know at this point, Eureka, what's going to happen with him. And the last one here is Jake LaCava. As it happens, his rights were traded to Inter Miami in MLS, and that is where his contract lies. So he will most likely be with them. And unless they want to send him out on loan, we are almost certainly not going to see from him. If they do send him out on loan, I'm pretty sure it'll be to their MLS Next Pro side, which plays in the MLS Next Pro, blah, 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 Division III league, whatever it is. Yeah.
Bleh. The less said, the better about that.
So those are our loanees, and then we'll do our options declined. Those include Timmy Mell, Junior Etu, and Kyle Gregg. I don't think that all of those options will really be that surprising to people based on what we saw. And, We do just like the team said. We do appreciate everything that those players contributed to this team, and I think that especially Junior Etu, his contributions were valuable at points during the season, but maybe they weren't just what we needed in terms of a long-term player. Now, players who are allowed to leave, these ones might actually leave some room for disagreement here. Jordan Scarlett, Thomas Van Kaziel, Ian Antley, Lawrence Wyke, Matthew Serbel, and Steven Dos Santos, also known as Duba. We'll get to those in 2 seconds, but I do want to say the status at the moment is unknown for Lucky Mkusana, Santi Castaneda, and Tate Johnson. So, Eureka, with all of that being said, let's do what we were going to do in our takeaways segment and ask, are there any further takeaways when it comes to this? And I'm assuming they're all going to be related to those allowed to leave the club.
Yeah. Mel, Etu, Greg. Okay. Thank you for your service. So the big names though, Jordan Scarlett and Steven Dos Santos. I think those. Well, and Lawrence Wyke, but we kind of already talked about.
Yeah, we talked about why that one might be a little more understandable.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. But Jordan Scarlett. Now, see, I wonder if in some instances like Scarlett, and Dos Santos, if because they had technically down years. Like we talked at length about Scarlett and kind of he's very good and a very good player, but kind of had a down year. Maybe what we had budgeted or what we wanted to pay these players might have been something a little different, and that might have been what the Neil Collins quote. I'm paraphrasing, but he said like, there were some tough decisions we had to make, but and we wish that they didn't leave in the fashion that they're leaving or something like that. But maybe that's kind of what this is getting at. But then again, maybe you're Jordan Scarlett and you think you can do bigger, better things than the Tampa Bay Rowdies or the USL Championship in general. It wouldn't surprise me to see Scarlett, Van Kazel, and Duba definitely at a different USL Championship club. Van Kazel, sure, he's kind of been bouncing around. Lawrence Wyke probably has better shot of doing anything overseas. Matt Serbel, similar situation, and Ian Antley, same kind of thing. Who knows what those will shake out? But yeah, Scarlett and Duba were the two big ones for me that in terms of allowed to leave. What are your thoughts?
I said last week that I thought Jordan Scarlett was probably going to be someone that I wouldn't mind seeing going, and that's just he did have a down year, but additionally it comes down to, I think that he was more than likely one of the players on a higher contract. I don't know that because we don't have that information. It is speculation, but if you're going to have a backup at a starter's level contract, I think that's where it gets a little harder to do. And if I'm assuming and, hopefully not making an ass out of you and me, then I'm going to say that's where it came from for him. Now, again, that is all still speculation. I do want to point that out.
Yeah. But Dos Santos, man, as a guy we brought in to be that difference maker, and he was for 2021. He unlocked a whole different. I mean, we had the crosses to nowhere offense, and then we unlocked it with a target man, and then it worked up until it didn't work, and then this year just sort of fell apart. The Dos Santos thing. In the rise of guys that we'll talk about next week, the league MVP being one of them, right? So, yeah, maybe I think that's a similar situation where it's just kind of like, hey, thanks, man. We tried this for a couple of years, and time to move on. Just didn't really fit in our system of what we want to do going forward. So, but dude. What a warrior that Dos Santos was. We'll talk about him next week, but those are big names and for a reason. I mean, I'm sure a lot of fans are looking at that like, why did we let Scarlett and Dos Santos go. Even especially with us losing LaCava for his bigger and better things that he'll do. And I mean, I guess out of the 4 loanees, LaCava's probably the one that's going to have the highest upside. Castellanos, I think we could see him probably at USL Championship somewhere, if not here with the Rowdies, maybe somewhere else. But if LaCava's not playing in the MLS, I mean, I think he's good enough to be a bench guy in the MLS right now. He's so young too, like that. Dude, you had said he might go to MLS. If he goes to MLS Next Pro, he is going to eat those guys alive. He is so much better than whatever that division's going to have. But then again, like, we're kind of the top of the class here at the USL Championship, so it's I think he's too good to loan back out to a team like us. I think he's probably better being developed at the club at the MLS level. And I think that's one of the reasons that they traded for his rights is to play. Because Inter Miami, it's one of the few teams I actually do sort of follow, like not religiously or anything, but I'm getting into them. And it's making it a lot easier now that LaCava's there. We're going to wear pink and black next year. So I'll probably have a little bit more to say about it. But part selfishly, I do hope he's there, even at a bench level, so I can be like, oh, see, LaCava. I know at least one of the guys here at Inter Miami.
For one last thing I will say for Steven Dos Santos, I think that this is a little bit of a syndrome related to, and this is going to be, people listening are going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? But Robert Lewandowski at Bayern Munich. Now, Robert Lewandowski was obviously one of their best players ever. He has scored incredible goals, an incredible number of goals for Bayern Munich, and they let him go. He's off on a free transfer to Barcelona, where he's doing very well. And, I'm sure all Barca fans are pretty satisfied with him. I will just put it that way. But, yeah, I think that Robert Lewandowski is he's doing, a lot of stuff that Bayern fans would be like, okay, why don't we have that anymore? But if you're Bayern Munich, you want to look at this in a way where you're like, you don't want to keep a striker a season longer than they're going to be effective. You want to let a striker go a season before they stop being effective, because you kind of have to cut your losses that way in terms of contracts. And that's just how it goes when you're, especially an older striker. And that's what we're looking at with Steven Dos Santos. This year, he was not ineffective. He was out facing injuries, much like, unfortunately, 2021. So that did impact his production numbers. But, you want to cut your losses before it turns into a problem situation, I think. And that's possibly what we're dealing with here. Yeah. So without, putting any words into the player's mouth or the coaching staff or anything like that, that's what I'm assuming is happening there. So, any thoughts on that? Does that seem outlandish?
Look, there's only every dollar matters at this level. And like you had said, look, if they were going to bring back Dos Santos, and have to fight with other teams for his services, and all he's going to do is not start, that wouldn't be advantageous when I think you're going to see a lot of change next year, and a lot of that is going to be predicated on bringing in younger guys who can play. Well, maybe, I mean, it's always going to be a mix. I think that Neil values veterans like Dos Santos just as much as he values youth and upside of like Adebayo Smith and Dayon Harris and those guys too. So I think that you're going to see a whole new batch of guys, because what we've been trying to do for 3 years has been good enough to get us just to the top of the mountain, but not not quite being the lone person at the top of the mountain. So we tried some things with these guys, and now I think it's time to bring in a whole fresh batch. And I'm sure Dos Santos was one of the better paid guys on the team. So yeah, it's like, hey, we tried it. It was good. I have nothing but good thoughts when it comes to Steven Dos Santos. And yeah, it's just one of those things. Hey, guess what? It's time to move on. We tried it, and we'll see what the next attempt looks like.
Exactly. So that should do it for us now tonight, listeners. Thank you for tuning in. And the last thing we want to say in our extra time segment here is, of course, please follow our usual co-host, Carlos Rueda. He was just in Qatar for the World Cup, and I'm sure he will be journaling that or, putting it out places where we can find it. So possibly here on RBLR Sports, stay tuned and pay attention to everything that, he was putting out there. I do want to make a note of that. So, Eureka, thank you for joining me this week. We needed to get through this, and we have one more part to go in our season review, which I think a lot of people will still be very interested in listening to because we are doing the forwards next. Those are the last players that we have to cover.
Yeah.
So
we save dessert. We save dessert for that.
Exactly.
For the last
exactly.
There,
we need to make sure that everyone on this roster is covered so that we know what we're looking at coming up into the 2023 season. And with
yes, sir.
that, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at RBLR James K. What about you, Eureka?
Yeah, I am at Eureka, Yurika, and RBLR right after that on all forms of social media.
All right. Now, please also like and subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and all other major podcast platforms. Wherever you need us, we are there. And for one more installment of the Rowdies preseason or postseason review, I will say, come on, you Rowdies.
Come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.